The funeral service of the three Goodall siblings is underway in Eldorado Park, south of Johannesburg. They were among 12 people killed in a head-on collision between a minibus taxi and a car earlier this month. They were buried, well, they will be buried later today. Hundreds of mourners line the streets outside the Eldorado Park Catholic Church to say their final goodbyes. It comes at a testing time for many people in South Africa. You're only allowed to have about 100 mourners, exactly 100 mourners, I would say, were allowed inside the church in this instance. This is according to the regulations that was declared by President Cyril Ramaphosa to curb the spread of COVID-19. I want to bring in Hasina Gori. She's been covering this story for us. Hasina, very good morning to you. What did you witness there?
What we saw this morning was a very somber community coming out in a very testing time to say goodbye to three children aged between 11 and 6 who died quite tragically on the way to school. They tried, the family at their best, to put in place the measures that police and government have put in place to try and stop the curb of COVID-19. What they sent out was messages saying instead of coming to the family house or coming to the church or coming inside it, to line the streets up and send your last farewells in that way, because it's friends from school, it's your neighbors as well as family members, all that want to come and say goodbye, and who gets in and who doesn't, is allowed to participate in this. So what they did was give out badges, so we don't have a scuffle at the door where people are fighting that I'm allowed in and, you have more rights than I do. And that mitigated that, any kind of squabble that you could have seen. So it was quite orderly. Also, they had hand sanitizers. What was quite interesting was also in church, they managed to set it out in such a way that between each pew there were two empty. So it allowed for that social distancing to some extent. People are still not understanding what exactly social distancing is. It is a 1 meter to 2 meter distance between people, even if within your own home. Right as we are right now. Not sitting right next to each other. So while there were spaces between the pews, people sitting next to each other were quite close. We saw that also on the streets as they lined up, that people were still bunched together. So those are still things we need to look at. But we saw police presence there. It was both JMPD, SABC, as well as the community police, foreign marshals, all trying to make sure that the rules were kept to, and that people did not, spread this even more, because that's the thing is with COVID-19, it can be spread through a sneeze, through a cough, and you don't know who might be a carrier at this point.
So are police allowing whoever's holding an event to, use their discretion in terms of the exact number, the 100, or are they physically counting people, to decide whether this is overboard or not?
But when we spoke to the police that were at the site, they said they can't really count the numbers. They are leaving it to discretion. And if it does get overboard, or it does look like it is over 100, what we saw was in the courtyard area of the church at one stage when the caskets were being unloaded, we did see quite a crowd there. And then the police, did come in, and then people did disperse. So they didn't allow the loitering of people outside, because that again is 100 people gathering, even though it might be in an open space.
I mean, it's a heavy emotional time. People are burying their loved ones, and now to worry about that, just compounds the situation. But you saying people are generally receptive to the rules and regulations that have been put in place?
I think people are understanding that there's a reason behind it. This is not willy-nilly. Government is not clamping down on a specific religious group or society. That there's a reason behind it. So I noticed that some of the members and the mourners that we met said that the family said no handshaking, no hugging, no kissing, and they've accepted that these are the new norm now. A lot of funeral notices are coming out now where you see people saying rather send your prayers than physically coming, or we regret to inform you that these are the only number of people allowed, so we're only having a close family ceremony. I think people are understanding that this right now is the way that we are going to mourn as well as celebrate life at the moment.
I mean, so many communities have had to change the way they normally do things. What about the Muslim community in terms of prayers and funerals as well?
So as you know, yesterday was Friday, and that's the first Friday prayer that followed the president's announcement. And what we saw was a lot of our community leaders coming out, Muslim community leaders coming out and saying, these are specific guidelines. Ensure that you have only a congregation of 50, not even 100, of 50. They made different open air areas to allow for people. They told people to bring their own mats so that you're not even, infecting maybe germs onto the mats, and to do the ablution at home so that you don't share towels. If you have to use ablution or the toilet facilities, to make sure you use a disposable paper to wipe your hands and to throw it away properly. There were marshals. People were told to stay in their cars and to come out when they were called, and to leave straight after. So I found that the Muslim community is really trying to put in place the guidelines. When it comes to funerals as well, similarly, notices coming out saying it is only close family and just to the burial, to rather not go to the family houses, to send messages rather. And I think many other communities are doing very similarly. You have certain mosques who have a huge congregation, like the Midrand mosque, saying they've closed right now, and no prayers will be done right now. So people are adapting slowly but surely.
Look, I guess we have to, isn't it? We're all in this together, and the WHO tells us that the most effective ways to curb this transmission, human transmission, is respiratory etiquette in terms of, coughing, sneezing, using the bent elbow, rapid testing, as well as the immediate isolation of people who have tested positive for COVID-19. In terms of the, respiratory etiquette, as we call it, did you see many people do that in terms of using the bent elbows? What about are people using the masks and gloves and stuff? Are people going to that extent?
We saw a few people with masks or scarves on their mouth. We do know that if you are coughing, even if it's not a positive COVID symptom, to ensure that you cover your mouth. You saw people with the bent arms. People are remembering sometimes quite a reflex afterwards, to go into the bent arms. But people are trying slowly, and I think it's going to be constant repetition and reminders before we get to a stage of saying, we understand.
I mean, especially with youngsters as well. My 8-year-old back home, I mean, he misses a lot of sneezes, but you see him afterwards trying to. I guess we need to get used to
slowly
all of this.
But surely, and hopefully we will flatten that curve, which is the main emphasis right now.
All right, Hasina, talking about the flattening of the curve, and I was explaining earlier on, when we talk about the curve, you talk about a whole number of cases coming to a point. And what you mean by flattening the curve is that you need to, stagger those new cases that are coming up in order to get people better access to healthcare systems, so you don't overburden or overwhelm the healthcare systems in the country. So, Hasina, thank you very much.